Hi, I'm Steve Clemons, and I have a question. The American people have finally spoken, but what exactly have they said? Let's get to the bottom line. We have razor-thin margins in several states, and as we speak, the tilt is toward Joe Biden. Trump is challenging the results in his usual way on Twitter. He'll probably take it to the courts. It's democracy on display in all its messy glory and drama. But what happened to all the rosy pre-election predictions from American media and pollsters, which was decimation for the Republicans? All the talk that the Democrats would flip the Senate, expand their majority in the House, take Texas, and that Biden was 10 points ahead of Trump all summer. Why were they so off the mark again? That's exactly what we want to find out with our guest today. Frank Luntz is one of the country's top pollsters and political strategists. Let's unpack what just happened. Frank, it's great to be with you tonight, and I know that you've been in the middle of a lot of this. Many of us thought it was COVID. That was going to drive the behavior of this election. What have you seen in the 24 hours since this election has taken place?
That it wasn't as much about policy as it was about persona, and that the media doesn't spend enough time discussing this. That for the undecided voters, for those who are not as politically active and engaged, in the end, they're trying to decide, is this somebody I want to live with for the next 4 years? Is this someone who I want to be a role model for my kids? Is this someone who I will trust with my safety and my security? And in the end, those undecided voters, and I set this up as a context, decided that they would rather accept Donald Trump's behavior and keep his agenda, remember this, just the undecided, then go with Joe Biden, who they like and respect and appreciate very much, but he just wasn't clear about where he would go, what he would do, what policies he would promote. And I believe that that had something to do with the polls being so wrong in those final few days. But there's something more, Steve, and that is that Trump people just don't like pollsters. They just don't like surveys. They want to be heard. They want to be listened to. They want to be respected and appreciated, valued, but they don't trust the polling profession because they think it's part of the swamp in Washington that they resent so much. And it is so much harder to get a Trump voter to answer a question than to get a Biden voter to answer a question. And so all of these polls, all of them, Washington Post, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, CNN, even Fox, underestimated the number of Trump voters that were out there. And that's why they all got it so wrong and why they were so shocked that the Republicans were able to keep the Senate, that they've added seats in the House, and that this election, although it will end up with Joe Biden, but that the election ended up so close.
Well, Frank, isn't this a replay of 2016? Weren't these voters missed last time? Didn't the same voters in that case not want to talk to pollsters or not want to tell them the truth? I listened to a focus group you did just this past weekend. It was a remarkable group of folks in the sense that they seemed candid. And I like that you didn't bring anything that you were telling them what to say. But some of the words they said about Trump with regard to COVID were irresponsible, unprepared, bombastic, reckless, bullying, confused. But yet you're saying that that's still the guy they felt they knew better than Joe Biden.
Those people who felt that way voted for Joe Biden. Those people had that an association with Trump. And I believe that if COVID had not happened, and this is the first time I'm now saying it because I've been thinking about it, if COVID had not happened, Donald Trump would have been reelected. And in fact, even with COVID, Trump could have been reelected if he just took the time to prepare a plan or to communicate a plan or not to fight with Dr. Fauci or just simply understand and empathize. This election, as it turned out, was not Joe Biden's to win. This election was Donald Trump's to lose. And he lost it, or he will have lost it by the time this airs. It's amazing to me that he's so miscalculated. He understands his own people perfectly, but he miscalculated those people who could have voted for him, assuming that they just wanted to hear and see what his own people heard and saw, and not understanding that what you say to a supporter is very different than what you say to someone who's undecided.
Do you think Biden made a mistake not pushing an agenda further out there? If you go to his website, you can find lots of details on getting rid of dirty energy, of, looking at how you get a fairer economy, how you get behind middle-class working American families. But yet you didn't hear as much of that when we were battling over Tony Fauci and whether he would keep his job or not. Do you think it was a mistake for the Biden team not to be more forthright and forceful with the agenda they were pushing?
Yes and no. No, because if he had done it, he would have divided either his core left-wing support or he would have lost the people in the center that he needed to win. If he said that he would support packing in the Supreme Court, just think about that. People in the center would have turned away from him. They would have thought that, well, this is what he's going to do as president. If he would have said that he was going to not get rid of the filibuster, then he would have had a problem with progressives. So he was wise politically not to articulate where he fully stood. However, there are ways to communicate, there are ways to signal a policy agenda without coming explicitly on one side or the other. And he chose not to do that. And instead, his whole campaign was that he was a nice guy. He would bring the country together. And that appealed, once again, to the people in the center that were turned off by Donald Trump's abusiveness. But Biden could have won a mandate. And I believe that he could have brought some Democratic senators and congressmen with him if he'd been just a little bit more policy oriented and a little bit less about, hey, trust me, I'm okay. In the end, Joe Biden is going to regret that he doesn't have a Democratic Senate. He's going to kick himself every single day.
Frank, one of the things that I think has come up over and over again is, what does this election result say about the United States of America now as a country? A lot of people have looked at this populist movement, those that questioned trade deals and globalization and the United Nations, sort of this Pat Buchanan crowd. They've always been part of the American political system. It's been fringe. But now it seems to have become much more mainstream. I was kind of calling it the sort of the meat-eating, coal-burning, anti-global populists. But is that now a defining element of the American personality in the world that's not going to easily be shifted back under the rug?
Yes, and I compliment you on that question. And I know that this is your first live show, and you have deserved this for a long time. We've known each other superficially for about a decade, but I've always been impressed that you've got the ability to get inside a question and really tease it out, and you just did it right there. We have a problem globally, and it is not an issue of just saying America first. That attitude towards Donald Trump across the international sphere is so bad that it actually is affecting how they treat American businesses, how they treat American workers who happen to be over there. And I am actually eager for a time when we still fight for the things that we believe in and still seek to benefit our country as much as we can, but don't seek to alienate others and actually go find a way to be multilateral. That this idea of going it alone only has so much success that we have to do better, and particularly with China. If we are going to hold their feet to the fire, if we're going to hold China accountable for the things that they have done to our businesses, have done to our workforce, have done to our national security, and most importantly, our supply chain, we can't do it alone. We need Canada's support. We need the UK support. We need Europe's support. It's not enough for us and the Japanese and the South Koreans. We need a global effort to say to China, listen, we want to do business with you. We want to use your manufacturing. We want you to buy our goods, but you're not going to play the same games that you played up to now. You've tilted the rules. You've ignored them. You've broken them. And the world is now going to hold you accountable. We need the world to participate in this.
Do you think that Joe Biden, in concert with the Republicans that are going to run the Senate and whoever will have the House, will be able to deliver that message in a compelling way to American citizens? Because I think a lot of these citizens who supported Trump over the years, they began to say, hey, we fought in Afghanistan, we fought in Iraq, by the way, we fought in Vietnam, we fought the Cold War, and China won. And so as they saw all the sacrifices their families were making over generations, they were hit by the 2008-2009 financial crisis. They saw their jobs offshored to China and to Vietnam and the Philippines and India. And so I guess my question is, do you think that message, I actually agree with you, but someone's got to go back and figure out, how do you explain to Americans that that engagement, even with allies, is going to be in their net benefit?
And that's why you have to go to the supply chain. And we've done research on this. We've done public opinion polling and focus groups. And it's the supply chain that scares Americans the most, that we should not be manufacturing or dependent upon China for anything that deals with health security, economic security, or national security. And the supply chain hits all of those. And that is something that the public would support. And the idea that we would have allies, just as we go to war with allies, we don't do anything alone. We need to do the same thing economically. Basically, this is economic diplomacy. And it's a lot better than sanctions. It's a lot better than having these disputes that can spiral out of control. And I think that what is needed more than anything else right now is clarity. What we want versus what we need, what we're prepared to do and what we're prepared to ignore. I think that the world is looking for America to calm down a little bit, to, I don't want to get myself into trouble. I don't want to get anyone, because I always think about this. We need a little bit of common sense, and we need a sense of cooperation and compromise while still holding to our principles, our values, and our priorities. And I choose those words carefully, because that is exactly what the Chinese government would understand, and that is where we could actually forge an agreement that would be good for both, not just both countries, but good for the global community.
Frank, part of the tectonics of this political race we've seen over this last year was not just COVID, not just an economic hit, which was also on the minds of many Americans, but also racial divides and inequality. The way COVID hit different communities of color much more disproportionately than it hit sort of white communities. And so I'm interested in what the tectonics of that are as you're looking at it, because when you look at some of President Trump's numbers, particularly in Florida, he actually made big, some substantial gains in communities of color that were unexpected. So what have we not seen? What are our blind spots on race and inequality that need to be brought to the surface?
Well, I'm not sure if we have any blind spots, because the communities that you just described, they're heard every day on the mainstream media. They're heard every day on cable. They're heard every day on Netflix, that they have a voice. The people who don't have a voice are actually your Trump people who may live in Tennessee or Kentucky or West Virginia. I'm running through my head the states where Trump got 65 or even 70% of the vote, North, South Dakota. These are places who don't have people fighting for them. There is no organization that is effective in helping people in Appalachia. There is no one who's speaking up for them. And those are the people who are ignored. Those are the people whose voices we need to hear. It is absolutely essential that we address those areas of inequality. And this is not meant to be a tagline for a political ad. It's real. The single biggest change in the American psyche over the last 11 months is to say that equivalence is no longer equal, and a belief that income equality is wrong, social inequality, racial inequality, that America has to do a better job ensuring that the lowest on our social economic levels are raised up, not to the highest, and we're not bringing people down, but we have to bring people up, and that is absolutely essential. And our expectations, our demands of corporate America are different today. Whereas we will no longer accept a CEO who makes $20 million while laying off 1,000 workers. That is untenable in the new America. These are things that we should be knowing about, but we often don't hear them, and we often don't see them. And I'm hopeful that we can understand them without bringing violence to our streets and without the ugliness that we saw in too many of our urban, I don't know how to communicate it, in the disputes that we've been having over the last 6 months.
Look, in 2016, I went out, I did some crazy thing where I went on 23andMe and I found all of these second and third cousins that I was allegedly blood related to. And I reached out to them by email and said, hey, I'm out talking about this stuff. Can I poll you about what you think? And it turns out of 100 of these miscellaneous folks I found, about 90 of them supported Donald Trump. It was really an astounding, I think, an astounding record of relatives I had that I didn't know. But I did that again this year. Now, that number slipped to about 70 people out of 100, still a majority. But when I look at that and I ask why, it goes back to this conversation I happened to have with Vice President Biden in 2016 around the same time. And he had said, Steve, the Democrats have become a party of snobs, and we have to fix that. And I'm wondering, as you see what's happened in the country right now, with Joe Biden, I think probably likely pulling ahead in the Electoral College vote, but do you think he's fixed the snobbery problem, as he defined it, of the Democratic Party?
Not yet. There's a way to go. And I think the greater problem is not snobbery. The greater problem is the cancel culture, and the idea that the Democrats can reject someone who they simply don't agree with, or that they reject tens of millions of people who voted for Donald Trump simply because they like Donald Trump. I am intolerant of those people who write others off because they simply disagree with them. That is not what we do in America, and that's not good for the political process, the education system in our country. And I am particularly nervous about the education system, the media, Hollywood, those institutions that affect how we come to our opinions, because right now we have such a dismissive cancel culture that will actually fire you if they disagree with you, or you will cease to exist. Snobbery can be dealt with. It's simply arrogance, and it's ugly, but it won't hurt anybody. The cancel culture will destroy people's lives, and that should not be happening in this country at this time.
What are the pathways for that? I think it's very powerful what you just said, and I've seen leading news media hosts talk about friends they had that were Trump supporters, and that they had to write them off. They had to cut them out. They had to say, no more. And I guess, I mean, you and I are on the same page. We have to talk, and we do talk to everyone around this. But what examples, I mean, you know our political system, what examples could necessarily be brought together to be greater, I suppose, models for people to see that? Because I don't see very many people making the case that they ought to talk to all sides and defending that vigorously and ferociously, because it is a disappearing part of the terrain.
I'm going to give you two examples, and you know both of them. Mitch Landrieu, the former mayor of New Orleans and lieutenant governor of Louisiana. I took Landrieu myself, as at the time I was a Republican pollster, and I'm trying to be much more nonpartisan. That's the only reason why I caveat that. But I took Landrieu to Iowa for the 2012 caucuses, and he and I went for 2 days, even stay overnight, and we met with Republican voters. And Landrieu did a better job at connecting with them than any of the Republican candidates. Landrieu genuinely likes people and wants to hear their concerns and wants to engage and interact with them. And he's so easy. And he walks up to people, and within 30 seconds, they're hugging him. And I thought, wow, what a wonderful guy. What a great human being, to love people so much that even complete strangers he will seek to help, seek to raise up, respects them, appreciates them. And on the Republican side, the Republican leader of the House, Kevin McCarthy. I've not met anyone more friendly, more kind. And what viewers will not know about Kevin, even though they may know him, is that almost every meal he's having with a Democrat, that in a city where they choose sides, they choose social engagements based on their politics and their policies, Kevin actually goes out of his way to interact with those from the other side of the fence. And they not only do they appreciate it, but I would argue that Kevin McCarthy is probably the most popular Republican among Democrats. These are two people to follow, to embrace.
That's very powerful. I mean, I think Senator Chris Coons, who has a regular faith group with folks across the aisle, members, both senators and House members on this, does a lot of the same thing. But it gets into this other, slightly uncomfortable conversation about conspiracy theories out in America. We used to talk about conspiracy theories kind of driving the Middle East, but QAnon and the beginning of this, we have our first member of Congress that's sort of a member of a QAnon conspiracy group. How do we begin dealing with that dimension of American politics?
I love that, and it's one of the reasons why I love the job. I love these focus groups. I'm actually a very shy person, not that you can tell from this interview, but people frighten me, and I can't go up to them unless I'm working. And if I'm seeking to understand people, to me, life is a jigsaw puzzle, and my job is to put it together every single day. And I start when I wake up in the morning, and my goal is to finish the puzzle that night. And I think that if we learn how joyful it is to listen and experience life through somebody else's eyes, to walk in their shoes, it'll make us better people. It'll help us resolve those challenges that face others, because in the end, we are good people by how much good we provide others, not by what we do for ourselves.
You paid tribute today, Frank, to on your blog, on your Twitter account, to John McLaughlin, who's a pollster for the president. And I was impressed with it because you were introspective and you said, you know, this guy got it more right than almost anybody else, if not being perfect. I'm just wondering where the polling industry is at this point. Some people, like, as you said, McLaughlin got it right, maybe before Kellyanne Conway got it right 4 years ago. What does the polling industry need to do to be introspective, to take in what's happened and really retool before it's thrown out, if it will be, in these discussions in future races?
Well, just maybe it should be thrown out. Just maybe we do a lot less polling and focus on a lot more policy. Maybe we focus on substance rather than the horse race. I think that would be good for democracy, particularly right now. And for the pollsters, they've got to get out of their ivory castles, or whatever that phrase is, ivory towers. And they've got to go, and this is why I live for those focus groups. And it's been very hard for me because it's dangerous for me to do this. I had a stroke in January. You may be able to tell from the difference in my voice. I need to learn from people. I need to ask them questions. I need to challenge them. And so this last weekend, I went up to Reading, Pennsylvania, and I interviewed 35 Trump voters. And then I went to Philadelphia and interviewed 30 Biden-Harris voters. And I found so much knowledge from that. And I realized that you can only get so much wisdom from numbers on a page that's produced through some sort of computer program. That yes, they do represent the opinions of people, but I need the full picture. I need it to be three-dimensional. And a poll only tells you so much. These focus groups that I do, the one-on-one interviews, I love it. I need it, and I encourage people to join me. And in fact, Steve, you were on that focus group because I'm trying to bring reporters, people who are responsible for explaining how people feel to others. I want you to see the truth. I want you to see what I see and hear what I hear. And so my mission is not just to engage in this and impart wisdom. My mission is to bring so many people into this process, so many more people that they'll understand how Americans really think and how Americans really feel. And when you get it wrong, it's your responsibility to fix it. I'm Jewish, and we don't have a process of now I need to know what to call it, confessions. And I look at my entire life as a confession. If I get something wrong, I don't want to confess to a religious leader. I want to confess to the people who I may have wronged. And that's why I said, and I acknowledge to John McLaughlin, that his polling was still better. He made mistakes. And a lot of the states that he said Donald Trump would win, we're going to find out that he's actually losing. But he was so much closer to the results. And I think that we will be a better country and a better people and a better democracy and a better society if we would learn to acknowledge our mistakes.
Well, Frank Luntz, pollster extraordinaire, you and I have a deal with each other never to be too polite and nice, but not a bad discussion at all. I want to thank you very much for your time this evening. Thank you, and we'll have you back, I hope, much more. So, Frank Luntz, thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
So what's the bottom line? After the last election, many Americans were shocked and confused. How could a businessman and Hollywood celebrity with no public service and with little regard for decorum be chosen to lead the United States of America? This time, knowing exactly what kind of wrecking ball that Donald Trump is, millions more voted for him. At this moment, Biden is on the verge of securing 270 Electoral College votes, which Trump is disputing. However, it turns out, Trumpism is not going away. It's not a fluke, and it's not a temporary blip. And Trump's style and presence in American politics isn't going to disappear, even if he's not in the White House. And that's the bottom line.